At 42 years old, Monroe Hayes, a freight logistics manager earning a modest $64,000 a year, understood the precise weight and measure of things. He could calculate the cubic volume of a trailer in his head and knew the exact financial cost of a single day's delay. What he could never quite calculate, however, was the crushing weight of his father-in-law's disapproval, a pressure that had been applied with relentless consistency for 8 long years. The devastating situation reached a quiet, brutal peak, not with a shout, but with a whisper from his own son. It was a Tuesday evening, and 8-year-old Elias, his small face clouded with a question too heavy for his years, looked up from his Lego starship and asked the one thing that could stop Monroe's heart. "Daddy, are you temporary?" Monroe's hand, which had been reaching for a stray Lego brick, froze in midair. The word hung in the quiet of their small living room in Dorita, a neighborhood in Charlotte far removed from the manicured opulence of his in-laws. "What did you say, buddy?" Elias didn't look up. He just kept clicking bricks together, his voice small and matter-of-fact. "Grandpa says you're temporary. He said it at the big house on Sunday. He told Auntie Clara that you're just visiting." The air left Monroe's lungs. He felt a cold, hollow space open up in his chest. For 8 years, he'd endured the condescending remarks, the backhanded compliments, the overt suggestions that his wife, Simone, had married beneath her. He had weathered every storm inside the walls of Bertram Walker's $1.9 million estate in Ballantyne, a sprawling testament to new money and old arrogance. But this was different. This was poison being dripped into the ear of his son. Monroe knelt down, his knees cracking on the hardwood floor. He looked at the deep brown of his son's skin, so like his own, and the tight, beautiful coils of his hair that bounced when he was excited. He put a hand on Elias's small shoulder. "Elias, look at me." The boy finally looked up, his eyes wide and uncertain. "I am not temporary," Monroe said, his voice low and steady, a stark contrast to the earthquake happening inside him. "I am your father. That is permanent. That is forever. Do you understand?" Elias nodded, a flicker of relief crossing his face, before he turned back to his Legos, the crisis averted in his world, but just beginning in Monroe's. In that moment, Monroe Hayes, the man who managed the movement of 1,000 tons of cargo, felt utterly and completely powerless. He had no idea the storm that was truly coming, or the quiet, devastating power he held in reserve. Have you ever felt like you weren't good enough for someone's family? Let us know in the comments how you handled it. And stick around to see how Monroe's story of quiet dignity unfolds. The facade of their life was built on a foundation of love and routine, carefully constructed within the 4 walls of their 1,400-square-foot house in Dorita. It was a life measured in small, tangible acts of service. At 6:15 a.m. every weekday, Monroe's alarm would go off, a gentle chime that was his signal to start the day. He'd slide out of the bed he shared with Simone, careful not to wake her, and head to the small kitchen. There, he would pack Elias's lunch, a turkey and cheese sandwich on wheat bread, a small bag of pretzels, an apple, and a juice box, a daily cost of about $3.50. He'd write a small note on the napkin, something simple like, "Have a great day, superstar," or a drawing of a smiling truck. Their home was a collage of modest, well-loved things. The sofa in the living room, a deep blue sectional, had been a major purchase for them 5 years ago, costing $1,200 from Rooms to Go. It was where they watched movies on their 55-inch Vizio television, a $450 Black Friday deal from 3 years prior. It was where Elias would build elaborate forts with blankets and pillows. Their car, a 2015 Honda Accord with 98,000 miles on the odometer, was paid off, a source of quiet pride for Monroe. He did the oil changes himself, saving them about $80 each time. Their weekly grocery bill from the local Food Lion rarely exceeded $150. It was a simple, manageable life built on his $64,000 salary and Simone's part-time income as a dental hygienist, which brought in another $28,000 a year. Simone, in these moments, was the woman he had fallen in love with. Her laughter filled the small house as she helped Elias with a school project at the $400 dining table from Wayfair. Her hand would find his as they sat on the porch swing he'd installed, a $120 purchase from Lowe's that he considered one of his best investments. She had a warmth that could make their simple house feel like a palace. Her skin, a luminous shade of brown, seemed to glow in the afternoon sun that streamed through their living room window. She was a loving mother and, he believed, a loving wife. But the moment the world of her family intruded, a subtle shift would occur. It was a change in temperature, a tightening around her eyes. The intrusions were frequent, usually taking the form of weekend visits to the Ballantyne estate. Driving there felt like crossing into another country. The modest homes of Dorita gave way to winding roads, gated communities, and sprawling brick mansions. Bertram's home was the largest of them all, a $1.9 million behemoth with a 3-car garage that housed his $90,000 Mercedes S-Class and his wife Eleanor's $75,000 Lexus SUV. The contrast was jarring. Monroe would park his reliable Honda next to a relative's brand-new $65,000 BMW, feeling like a dinghy docking next to a yacht. Inside, the air was different. It was filled with the scent of expensive candles, something floral and complex that probably cost more than his weekly grocery bill. Eleanor, Simone's mother, would greet them at the door, her hair perfectly coiffed, her fingers adorned with rings Monroe couldn't even begin to price. She'd hug Simone, then offer Monroe a cool, polite smile. She was always carrying a designer handbag, a rotation that included a $1,500 Louis Vuitton Speedy and a $2,200 Gucci Marmont, objects that seemed alien in Monroe's world of spreadsheets and shipping manifests. The conversations were a performance of wealth. Bertram would talk about the stock market, about his latest real estate venture, about the disappointing $30,000 bonus one of his executives received. Simone's siblings, all successful in fields their father approved of, a lawyer, a surgeon, would join in. They spoke a language of luxury resorts, 7-figure portfolios, and private school tuitions. Monroe, who found satisfaction in negotiating a 5% discount on a bulk shipment, had nothing to contribute. He would stand there in his $45 Dockers and his $60 polo shirt from Kohl's, feeling like an exhibit. And Simone, his warm, laughing Simone, would subtly drift away from him, drawn into the glittering orbit of her family. She wouldn't hold his hand here. She wouldn't catch his eye across the room. She was a walker again, and he was just the man she had inexplicably brought with her. The pressure campaign was a slow, methodical erosion, a war of 1,000 cuts waged over 8 excruciating years. It wasn't one single event, but a relentless accumulation of slights, insults, and humiliations, each one designed to chip away at Monroe's worth and the foundation of his marriage. The outrage was a slow-burning fire in his chest. The first major salvo came 2 years into the marriage, at Elias's second birthday party. Monroe and Simone had hosted it in their backyard, a humble affair with a small bounce house they'd rented for $150 and a homemade cake. Monroe had spent the morning grilling hot dogs. He felt proud, a father providing a happy day for his son. Then Bertram and Eleanor arrived an hour late. They didn't bring a small toy or a book. Bertram walked straight past Monroe and presented Elias with a large box. Inside was a high-end drone, a DJI Mavic Mini, that retailed for $599. Elias, only 2, could barely comprehend it. Bertram knelt, his expensive $400 Salvatore Ferragamo loafers digging into the grass. "This is from your real family, little man," he said, his voice loud enough for all the other parents to hear. "For when you're ready for bigger things." He glanced up at Monroe, a smirk playing on his lips. The implication was clear. Monroe and his world were small, temporary. The drone was a symbol of the bigger, better life that awaited Elias, a life without Monroe in it. Simone just smiled nervously. "Oh, Daddy, you shouldn't have," she said, her voice betraying no anger, only a placid acceptance of her father's casual cruelty. 4 years in, the attacks became more direct. It was Christmas Eve at the Ballantyne estate. The 20-foot Christmas tree was dripping with thousands of dollars in ornaments. The dining room table was set for 20, laden with fine china and crystal. Monroe was seated at the far end of the table, next to a distant cousin he'd never met. Bertram, holding a $200 bottle of wine, stood to give a toast. He talked about family, about legacy, and then his eyes landed on Simone. "And to my beautiful daughter Simone," he said, raising his glass, "may the new year bring you everything you deserve." I was just talking to my friend Dr. Albright the other day. His son, a brilliant cardiologist with a 7-figure practice, just became single. A man of real substance. He paused, letting the words hang in the air, a thick, suffocating cloud. "It's so important for a woman to be with a partner who can provide, who can elevate her." The entire table went quiet. Everyone looked at Monroe. He felt his face grow hot, the blood pounding in his ears. He looked at Simone, pleading with his eyes for her to say something, to defend him, to defend their marriage. She just laughed, a high, nervous titter. "Daddy, you are so embarrassing," she chided gently, waving a dismissive hand. She didn't look at Monroe. It was a public assassination of his character, and his wife had handed her father the knife. The rest of the dinner was a blur of humiliation. He ate his perfectly cooked prime rib, which tasted like ash in his mouth. By the 6th year, Bertram's campaign had moved from social undermining to direct financial interference. He summoned Monroe and Simone to his home office, a cavernous room paneled in dark wood, dominated by a desk that cost more than Monroe's car. He sat behind it like a king on a throne. "I've been looking at your finances," Bertram began. No preamble, no pleasantries. "That little house in Dorita, you're barely building any equity. And Monroe," he said, turning his cold gaze on him, "that salary of yours has been stagnant for years. It's not a provider's salary." Monroe clenched his jaw, but said nothing. "I have a solution," Bertram continued, leaning forward. "I have a 2-bedroom condo over in South Park, a nice one. I'll let you live there, rent-free for a year. Sell the house, take the little bit of money you get from it, and Simone can invest it with me. It'll give her a real asset. And," he added, with a chilling finality, "it will be much easier for Simone and the boy to manage on their own when this arrangement with you runs its course." This time, Monroe spoke. His voice was quiet, but firm. "Thank you for the offer, Bertram. But we're not selling our home, and my arrangement with my wife and son is called a family. We're doing just fine." Bertram leaned back, a look of pity on his face. "If you say so," he said, as if speaking to a child, "but don't say I didn't warn you." The most devastating blow, the one that broke something deep inside him, came from his own son. It was 2 years after the condo offer, just a few weeks ago. Elias was 8. Monroe was under the kitchen sink, his back aching, trying to fix a leak in the faucet pipe. He was saving them a $200 plumber's fee. Elias wandered into the kitchen, holding a drawing he'd made. "Daddy?" "Yeah, buddy?" Monroe grunted, twisting a wrench. "Are you temporary?" Monroe froze. The wrench slipped from his hand, and clattered to the floor of the cabinet. He slowly slid out from under the sink and sat on the linoleum floor, his heart a cold, heavy stone in his chest. "What did you say, Elias?" Elias shuffled his feet, not looking at him. He held up his drawing. "Grandpa says you're temporary. He says you're just visiting. He says Mommy is going to come back home to him soon, and I can have a bigger bedroom." The words were delivered with the unfiltered, innocent honesty of a child, repeating what he'd heard, which only made them cut deeper. Elias wasn't being cruel. He was just confused. He was asking a question an adult would never dare to ask so directly. Monroe pulled his son into a hug, burying his face in the boy's soft, coiled hair, inhaling the scent of kid shampoo and crayon wax. He held him tight, trying to physically transfer the certainty he no longer felt. "No, buddy," he whispered into his son's ear, his voice thick with emotion he was desperately trying to suppress. "I am not temporary. I am your dad. That is the most permanent thing in the world." He soothed Elias's confusion, reassured him with promises of a movie night, and sent him off to play, his son's brief sadness resolved. But as Monroe sat there on the cold kitchen floor, surrounded by his tools and the evidence of his humble hands-on life, he felt a profound and terrifying loneliness. The war wasn't at the gates anymore. It was inside his house. It was inside his son's head. And he realized, with a clarity that felt like broken glass in his gut, that he was losing. What would you do if you heard your child ask a question like that? It's a moment that can change everything. For Monroe, it was the moment before the world tilted on its axis. The discovery did not arrive with a dramatic confrontation or a tearful confession. It came silently, through the cold blue light of a smartphone screen on a Friday night. It was March 10th at exactly 10:32 p.m. Monroe was in his office, a small walk-in closet he had converted with a cheap particle board desk and a single shelf. The hum of his old Dell desktop computer was the only sound in the cramped space. Downstairs, he could hear the faint, cheerful music of a cartoon Elias had left on. Simone was already in bed, lost in a world he was no longer sure he was a part of. His phone buzzed on the desk. A text message from a number he recognized immediately. Kevin, Simone's youngest brother. Kevin was different from the rest of the Walkers. He was quieter, an artist who had defied Bertram's demand that he go into finance and was now a struggling but happy graphic designer. He had always been kind to Monroe, treating him with a respect that was glaringly absent from the rest of the family. The message was short and alarming. "Call me. Urgent. Don't let Simone know." A knot of ice formed in Monroe's stomach. He took his phone and stepped out into the hallway, closing the closet door behind him. He walked to the window at the end of the hall, looking out at the quiet, dark street. He pressed the call button. Kevin picked up on the first ring. "Monroe?" His voice was low, laced with anxiety. "Kevin, what's wrong?" "It's late." "I know, I'm sorry. I shouldn't even be doing this, but it's not right. What they're doing is not right." Who is doing?" Monroe asked, his heart starting to beat faster. There was a hesitant pause. "My dad," Kevin said, his voice barely a whisper. "And my sister, Clara. I was at the house today to pick up some old art supplies from the attic. I thought everyone was out. But Dad was in his office on a conference call with Clara." The door was open a crack. "I heard them. Monroe, they're not just pressuring Simone. They're actively planning for her to divorce you." Monroe leaned his forehead against the cool glass of the window. The words confirmed his deepest fears, but hearing them spoken aloud gave them a new, terrifying weight. "He wants her to do it soon," Kevin continued, his words rushing out. "He thinks you guys have about $80,000, maybe $90,000 in equity in your house. He has this whole plan. She leaves you, files for divorce, forces a sale of the house. She takes her half, which he thinks is like 40 grand, and invests it in his company. He's starting some new real estate project in Charleston, and he's trying to scrape together capital. $80,000. It was a disturbingly accurate guess of their home's equity. Bertram had done his homework. Monroe, he was talking about you. It was cold. He said your salary was a joke and that you were holding Simone back. He said getting her out and getting that clean infusion of cash was the best thing for the family business. Kevin took a shaky breath. I was so mad I did something stupid. Or maybe it was smart. I don't know. I recorded it. Just the last few minutes of it on my phone. Monroe felt his entire body go rigid. You recorded it? Yeah. It's not much. Just a couple of minutes. But you can hear him. You can hear the whole plan. I can send it to you. I think you deserve to know what you're really up against. Send it, Monroe said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Okay, Monroe, be careful. My dad, he doesn't lose. Thanks, Kevin, Monroe said and ended the call. A moment later, his phone buzzed again. A sound file had arrived. He stared at it for a full minute, his thumb hovering over the play button. His hand was trembling. He could feel the sweat on his palm. He pressed play. The audio was slightly muffled, but Bertram's voice was unmistakable, booming, confident, and utterly dismissive. The point is, it's a clean $80,000 infusion once the house sells. We get her out, we get the house equity, and we roll it into the Charleston project before the end of the second quarter. It's found money. Then he heard his sister-in-law Clara's voice, sharp and sycophantic. And Simone is on board? She's ready to file? She's getting there, Bertram's voice replied, laced with smug satisfaction. She just needs one final push. She knows he's holding her back. A man making $64,000 a year can't give her the life she deserves. It's a mercy, really. We're doing her a favor. Once she's free of him, she'll see that. The recording ended. Monroe stood motionless in the dark hallway. The phone clutched in his hand. The faint cartoon music from downstairs seemed to mock the silent devastation that had just occurred. A mercy, a favor. They were destroying his family, poisoning his wife's mind, and calling it an act of kindness. The cold knot in his stomach tightened into something hard and sharp. The years of quiet humiliation, of feeling small and inadequate, coalesced into a single point of cold, crystalline fury. They thought he was weak. They thought he was poor. They thought they knew the value of everything he had. They had no idea how wrong they were. The first rule of logistics is that you never show your hand until the shipment is ready to move. The morning after receiving the recording, Monroe became a master of emotional logistics. He compartmentalized the rage, the heartbreak, the betrayal, and packed it away in a cold, dark corner of his mind. Outwardly, he was the same Monroe he had always been. It was the hardest acting job of his life. Saturday, March 11th began at 7:15 a.m. The smell of sizzling pancake batter filled the small kitchen. Elias sat at the dining table, humming and coloring in his Spider-Man coloring book. Monroe, wearing his worn gray sweatpants and a faded college t-shirt, flipped a pancake onto a plate and slid it in front of his son. Simone came downstairs a few minutes later, wrapped in a $250 silk robe her mother had given her for Christmas. It was a stark symbol of the world she was torn between. She looked tired, but her eyes held a new, unsettling resolve. "Morning," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Smells good." "Morning," Monroe replied, his voice even and warm. He didn't look at her. He focused on pouring more batter onto the hot griddle. "Pancakes? Just coffee for me," she said. She stood by the counter, sipping from her mug. My parents invited us for a barbecue tomorrow. Just a casual thing? Sounds nice, Monroe said, his back still to her. You and Elias should go. I think I need to catch up on some work around the house. She paused. You're not coming? Better if I get this stuff done, he said, finally turning to face her with a placid smile. Tell them I say hello. Inside, he was screaming. Every normal word, every casual gesture was a lie. He was a stranger in his own kitchen, serving breakfast to a woman who was conspiring, consciously or not, to dismantle their life for a pittance of $40,000. Over the next 2 weeks, he watched the script he'd heard on the recording play out in real time. Simone, believing she was acting on her own epiphanies, began to execute Bertram's plan. On Tuesday, she brought up the house. You know, she said casually as they washed the dishes, I was talking to a friend, and her realtor said the market is crazy right now. We should get the house appraised, just to see what it's worth. It would be good to know our number. Monroe just dried a plate and stacked it carefully. That's a good idea, honey. We should look into that. He knew Bertram had planted that seed. He knew the number was the only thing they cared about. A week later, it was his career. They were watching television, a generic crime procedural that Monroe wasn't paying attention to. During a commercial for a luxury car, Simone turned to him. Monroe, have you thought about looking for a new job? I mean, you're so smart with all that logistics stuff, but you've been at the same company for 10 years. Don't you feel stagnant? Maybe you could find something with more potential. There it was, the exact word from the recording. Stagnant. The condescension, once her father's, was now flowing from her own lips. He felt a flash of white-hot anger, but smothered it instantly. He turned to her, his expression one of mild contemplation. You know, I've been thinking the same thing. I'm always looking, honey. You never know what's out there. Each lie was a small piece of his soul turning to ice. The final, inevitable scene came on a Thursday evening. Elias was at a sleepover. The house was quiet. Simone asked him to sit down at the dining room table. Her hands were trembling slightly. She had rehearsed this. He could see it in the way she wouldn't meet his eyes. Monroe, she began, her voice flat and distant. I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about my future, and I don't think this is working anymore. He waited, letting the silence stretch. I think I want a divorce, she said. The words landed with no impact. He had already heard them. He had already felt them. All that was left was the performance. He let a look of shock and devastation cross his face. Simone, what? Where is this coming from? I thought we were okay. We're not okay, she said, gaining a little more confidence now that the hardest part was over. She began to recite the lines he knew were coming, the justifications fed to her by her father. I feel held back. I feel like I'm not living up to my potential. I need to think about my future, and Elias's future. I need to be part of my family's legacy. He didn't argue. He didn't fight. He played the part of the blindsided, heartbroken husband perfectly. He asked what he had done wrong. He asked if there was a chance to fix it. She shook her head, her expression a mask of regret that he knew was not entirely her own. I'm sorry, Monroe. I've already made up my mind. That night he slept on the $1,200 sectional sofa. As he lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling of the life they had built together, he didn't feel sadness. He didn't feel rage. He felt a profound and chilling calm. The performance was over. The strategy could now begin. The following Monday at 9 a.m. sharp, Monroe walked into the lobby of a sleek glass tower in uptown Charlotte. The air inside was cool and smelled of success. He took the elevator to the 34th floor, to the offices of Adebayo and Associates. The firm was known for two things: an unyielding toughness in litigation and a specialization in complex financial forensics during high-asset divorces. He was led into a corner office with a panoramic view of the city. Behind a large mahogany desk sat Funke Adebayo, a formidable black woman in her late 50s. Her salt and pepper hair was styled in elegant, tight twists, and she wore a sharp, tailored suit that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment. She regarded him with intelligent, discerning eyes. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice smooth and deep, "thank you for coming in. Your email was intriguing. Please, sit." Monroe sat, placing his worn leather briefcase, a gift from his own father 20 years ago, on his lap. He felt out of place in this world of polished wood and expensive legal power. "My wife asked me for a divorce last week," Monroe began, his voice steady. "She believes our only significant marital asset is our home, which has approximately $85,000 in equity. Her father, Bertram Walker, has convinced her to file for divorce in order to force a sale of the home so she can invest her half of the proceeds, about $42,000, into his family business." Ms. Adebayo listened, her fingers steepled, her expression unreadable. "And you believe this is not her own desire?" "I know it's not," Monroe said. He took his phone out of his pocket, placed it on the polished desk, and pressed play. For 2 minutes, the sound of Bertram Walker's smug, calculating voice filled the quiet office. Monroe watched Ms. Adebayo's face. Her expression didn't change, but he saw a flicker in her eyes, a hardening. When the recording finished, she was silent for a moment. Then she spoke, her tone cold as steel. "This is not just a family squabble, Mr. Hayes. This is textbook fraudulent inducement. They are conspiring to defraud you of a marital asset by manipulating your wife under false pretenses. The recording is damning." Monroe took a deep breath. "That's only half of the story." Ms. Adebayo raised an eyebrow. "They believe our net worth is tied up in a house in Dorita and my $64,000 salary," Monroe explained. "They are mistaken. 10 years ago, when my father passed away, he left me $100,000. He was a truck driver his whole life, saved every penny. He told me to make it grow. Simone and I agreed to invest it and not touch it. We opened a joint investment account. It was supposed to be for Elias's future, a nest egg for college or a down payment on a house someday." He slid a single piece of paper across the desk. It was a statement from Vanguard for the account ending in 4859. "Simone's father handles all her family's finances," Monroe continued. "She's not financially savvy, and frankly, she forgot this account even existed. I've managed it quietly for the last decade. I never spoke of it to her family. It wasn't their business." Ms. Adebayo picked up the statement. Her eyes scanned the page, then widened almost imperceptibly. She looked from the paper to Monroe and back again. The number at the bottom of the page was clear and stark. Total assets, $340,112.37. A slow smile spread across Funke Adebayo's face for the first time. It was a predator's smile. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice filled with a newfound energy, "your father-in-law thinks he's playing checkers in the park. We are about to introduce him to the game of chess." For the next hour, they mapped out the strategy. There would be no angry phone calls, no messy confrontations. The response would be clinical, precise, and delivered with the full force of the law. Ms. Adebayo's fee was $750 per hour, a staggering sum for Monroe, but he knew it was an investment in his and his son's future. They would draft a letter. It would be sent not to Simone, but directly to Bertram Walker. The letter would politely acknowledge Simone's intent to file for divorce. It would then lay out the full, itemized schedule of marital assets, starting with the modest home equity and culminating in the Vanguard Joint Investment Account, complete with the account number and the exact balance of $340,112.37. The final paragraph would be the masterstroke. It would state their awareness of a conspiracy to defraud Monroe and would include a verbatim transcript of the most damning line from the recording. We get her out, we get the house equity, and we roll it into the Charleston project. It's a clean $80,000 infusion. The letter would conclude with a settlement offer. In light of the documented fraudulent inducement, Monroe would agree to a standard 50-50 split of the home's equity. However, he would be retaining 100% of the investment account. If they refused, the recording would become Exhibit A in a lawsuit that would name not just Simone, but Bertram Walker and his company, Walker Holdings, as co-conspirators. "When do you want to send this?" Ms. Adebayo asked, her pen poised. Monroe thought of all the years of humiliation, the birthday parties, the Christmas dinners, the constant grinding condescension. He thought of his son's worried face. "There's a family gathering for Easter," Monroe said, "at his house this Sunday." Ms. Adebayo's smile returned. "Excellent," she said. "The theater of it will be effective." Easter Sunday dawned bright and clear, a perfect Carolina spring day. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. At Bertram Walker's estate in Ballantyne, the stage was perfectly set. The sprawling back lawn, a carpet of impossibly green grass, was dotted with 30 members of the Walker clan, all dressed in their Easter best. A symphony of pastel linens, floral dresses, and expensive leather shoes. The air was thick with the scent of lilies from the elaborate floral arrangements and the smoky aroma of lamb grilling on a massive $15,000 outdoor kitchen setup. Bertram was in his element, holding court by the grill. He wore a crisp pink polo shirt and white trousers, a glass of champagne in his hand. He was laughing, a loud, booming sound that echoed across the lawn. He was the patriarch, the master of his universe, radiating success and absolute control. Simone stood near him, a fixed, serene smile on her face. She looked relieved, as if she had finally unburdened herself of a great weight. She caught Monroe's eye for a fleeting second as he arrived, her smile faltering before she quickly looked away. Monroe had arrived alone at exactly 1:30 p.m. He wore a simple navy blue blazer, a white shirt, and the same $45 Dockers he wore to every family event. He was an island of sober color in a sea of pastels. He moved through the crowd with a quiet, unnerving calm, offering polite nods and brief greetings. Most of his in-laws offered clipped hellos. A few, like Clara, ignored him completely. He didn't care. He was not a participant today. He was a spectator. He found a spot near a large oak tree at the edge of the patio, a perfect vantage point from which to watch the play unfold. At precisely 1:45 p.m., as planned, a man appeared at the edge of the property, walking up the long, curved driveway. He was not a guest. He wore the nondescript uniform of a professional courier service, a navy blue polo shirt and slacks. He carried a single, large, cream-colored envelope. He approached the patio and spoke to one of the caterers. "I'm looking for Mr. Bertram Walker." The caterer pointed toward the grill. The courier navigated through the clusters of laughing family members, a silent, purposeful figure. He stopped a few feet from Bertram. "Mr. Walker?" Bertram turned, annoyed by the interruption to his performance. "Yes? What is it?" His eyes flicked over the man's uniform with disdain. "This is for you, sir," the courier said, holding out the envelope. Bertram took it, his expression one of pure irritation. "What is this? I'm in the middle of a family event." He glanced at the return address. Adebayo and Associates, attorneys at law. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. He likely assumed it was related to one of his many business dealings. He tore the envelope open with an impatient flick of his thumb. From his vantage point under the oak tree, Monroe watched every micro-expression. The entire scene seemed to slow down, the cheerful chatter of the party fading into a low hum. Bertram pulled out the multi-page document. He scanned the first page, a standard legal cover letter. His confident smile remained, though it seemed to tighten at the edges. He flipped to the second page. Monroe knew this was the schedule of marital assets. He watched as Bertram's eyes moved down the list. Primary residence, 4518 Finchley Drive, Charlotte, North Carolina. Estimated equity, $85,000. Bertram nodded almost imperceptibly, a flicker of smug confirmation. This was the number he knew. This was the prize. Then his eyes moved to the next line item. Vanguard Joint Investment Account, Brokerage, account number 4859. Current value, $340,112.37. Monroe saw it happen. The color drained from Bertram's face. It was not a gradual change. It was as if a switch had been flipped, plunging his ruddy, confident complexion into a ghastly pale white. His jaw went slack. The champagne glass, held loosely in his other hand, tilted precariously. He stared at the number, his eyes wide with disbelief. He reread the line, his lips moving silently. Then he reread it again. He frantically flipped to the next page. Monroe knew this page contained the verbatim quote from the recording. Furthermore, we are in possession of evidence demonstrating a conspiracy to commit fraudulent inducement. This evidence includes a recording from March 10th in which you are quoted as saying, "We get her out, we get the house equity, and we roll it into the Charleston project." It's a clean $80,000 infusion. Bertram's head snapped up. His eyes, now filled with a toxic mixture of fury and panic, scanned the crowd like a cornered animal. They swept past cousins and aunts, past his own wife, until they found and locked onto Monroe, standing perfectly still under the oak tree. The look in Bertram's eyes was not one of simple anger. It was the look of a king who had just been checkmated by a pawn in front of his entire court. The social fabric of the party tore apart in that instant. The laughter had died down. People were starting to notice that their host was standing frozen, his face a mask of horror. Bertram spun around and grabbed Simone's arm, his grip far from gentle. "What is this?" he hissed, shoving the papers in her face. His voice was a venomous whisper that still carried across the now silent lawn. "What is this $300,000 account? What did you do?" Simone looked at the document, her eyes wide with confusion. "What? I don't know what you're talking about." She saw the number. She saw the account details. A dawning, sickening realization spread across her face as a long-forgotten memory surfaced. The nest egg. The money from Monroe's father. The money she had dismissed and forgotten, and which her own father had just tried to swindle her out of seeing a penny of. Her face went as white as her father's. She looked from the paper to her father, and then across the lawn to Monroe. Her expression was one of complete and utter devastation. In that one moment, she understood everything. She understood the smallness of her father's plan, the magnitude of her own miscalculation, and the quiet, unmovable strength of the man she had just tried to throw away for a pittance. The Easter party was over. The charade was finished. The only sound was the gentle spring breeze rustling the leaves of the oak tree where Monroe stood, watching the empire of glass and arrogance shatter. The collapse was not a single explosion, but a cascade of consequences, each one a direct result of the bomb detonated in that single, cream-colored envelope. The fallout was swift, brutal, and meticulously documented. First, there was Simone. Her world, which she thought was being upgraded, imploded. The afternoon of the party, Her phone began a frantic assault on Monroe's. He never answered. He let every call go to voicemail, each message a station in her emotional disintegration. Voicemail 1, Sunday, 4:17 p.m., confusion. Monroe, call me, please. I don't understand this letter. My father is going crazy. We need to talk. Voicemail 2, Sunday, 6:02 p.m. Anger. How could you? How could you hide $300,000 from me, from our family? You made me look like a fool. My father is furious. Voicemail 3, Sunday, 10:45 p.m. Dawning horror. Monroe, Kevin just called me. He told me about the recording. He played it for me. Oh my God. A clean $80,000 infusion. That's what he said. Oh my God, Monroe, I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know that's what he was doing. Her voice was choked with sobs. Voicemail 4, Monday, 9:22 a.m. Pleading. Please, Monroe, please talk to me. We can fix this. I'll leave them. I'll do anything. I love you. I was just so confused. And my dad? He twisted everything up. He made me think, please don't let him win. Don't let him destroy our family. Voicemail 5, Tuesday, 3:10 p.m. Desperation. Your lawyer sent mine the official offer. Monroe, you can't be serious. You can't take that money away from me. From Elias. I'm your wife. This isn't justice. This is cruelty. Monroe never returned a single call. Through Ms. Adebayo, he proceeded with the divorce on the exact terms outlined in the letter. The recording was entered as evidence. The judge, a stern woman who had seen her share of marital disputes, took a dim view of the blatant conspiracy. The divorce was finalized in 6 months. Simone received exactly half the equity from the house, $42,500. She also kept her 2018 Acura RDX, which had a $350 monthly payment. The judge, citing the clear evidence of fraudulent inducement and Bertram's plan to absorb marital assets, awarded the entirety of the Vanguard investment account, now valued at over $355,000, solely to Monroe. Simone, having sold the only home her son had ever known, could not afford to live on her own. She was forced to accept her father's prior offer and move into the 2-bedroom condo in South Park. But it was not the triumphant return to the family fold she had envisioned. It was a monument to her failure, a daily reminder of the life and the fortune she had thrown away. Her relationship with Bertram was shattered, poisoned by blame and resentment. He saw her as a fool who had cost him a fortune. She saw him as the architect of her ruin. Next, there was Bertram. His downfall was not financial, but social and absolute. He was exposed in front of his entire family as a cheap, manipulative schemer. The story of the day of the letter became an infamous legend, whispered at every subsequent family gathering. His carefully cultivated image as an infallible patriarch with unerring business acumen was destroyed. He had orchestrated a grand scheme to swindle his son-in-law out of $40,000, and in the process had been revealed to be both cruel and, even worse in his world, incompetent. The Charleston real estate project, which had relied on a series of small infusions from family, stalled when confidence in his judgment evaporated. The preliminary expenses and lost opportunity cost his company an estimated $150,000. But the real cost was his authority. He had lost control over his daughter and the respect of his family. He was a king in a court that no longer feared him. Kevin, the unlikely hero, was briefly ostracized by his furious father and sisters. But among the younger generation of cousins, his act of quiet integrity earned him a new level of respect. Monroe made a point to meet him for coffee a month after the divorce was final. He slid a cashier's check for $10,000 across the table. "For your design business," Monroe said simply. "A thank you is not enough." Kevin tried to refuse, but Monroe insisted. You chose what was right over what was easy. That's a rare thing. Finally, there was Monroe and Elias. They moved out of the house in Dorita and into a modest, clean, two-bedroom rental apartment in the University City area, closer to a better school for Elias. It cost $1,450 a month. The sale of the house had netted Monroe his own $42,500, which he added to the investment portfolio. With his future, and his son's, now secure, he felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. The weight of his in-laws' judgment was gone. He was no longer temporary. He was free. 2 years passed. The rain that had seemed to define Monroe's inner world for so long had given way to steady, reliable sunlight. The glass towers of uptown Charlotte no longer felt intimidating. They were just part of the landscape of his new life. Monroe, now 44, stood not in a cramped closet office, but in a bustling, open-plan space in a converted warehouse just north of the city center. The smell of fresh paint and brewing coffee filled the air. This was the headquarters of the Hayes and Son Freight Apprenticeship. After the divorce, Monroe had taken a significant portion of the secured funds, around $200,000, and poured it into a dream he had long held. He quit his stagnant job and founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to training young, underserved men and women from Charlotte's overlooked neighborhoods for high-demand careers in logistics and supply chain management. He named it in honor of his father, the lifelong truck driver whose quiet savings had become the seed of this new beginning. The space was modest, exposed brick walls, second-hand desks, and a fleet of 6 state-of-the-art logistics simulation computers that had cost $30,000. It was a place of purpose, humming with the energy of a dozen apprentices learning about bills of lading, freight brokerage, and fleet management. Elias, now 10, was thriving. He was a happy, well-adjusted boy who split his time easily between his parents' homes. The confusion that had once clouded his eyes was gone, replaced by the bright confidence of a child who knows he is deeply and unconditionally loved. He often spent afternoons at the apprenticeship, doing his homework at a small desk Monroe had set up for him in his office. One Tuesday afternoon, as the sun set, casting long golden rays through the warehouse's large windows, Elias came into Monroe's office holding a piece of paper. His hair, now in neat twists that he was immensely proud of, bounced as he walked. "I made this for your wall, Daddy," he announced, holding up a drawing. Monroe turned from his computer. He took the drawing from his son. It was a picture of 2 figures standing side by side. Both were smiling. One was tall, the other small. Above them, Elias had written in wobbly letters, "The Hayes Men." Monroe's heart swelled. He looked closer at the drawing. Elias had taken great care, using a rich, dark brown crayon to color in their faces and arms. He had drawn the twists in his own hair and the neat, short cut of Monroe's. It was a perfect, honest portrait of their family. "This is the best thing I have ever seen," Monroe said, his voice thick with emotion. "Where should we put it?" "Right there," Elias said, pointing to the wall behind Monroe's desk. "So everyone who comes in knows who's the boss." Monroe laughed, a full, easy sound. He took a piece of tape and carefully affixed the drawing to the wall. It hung next to a faded framed photograph of his own father, a proud, handsome black man in his 20s, leaning against the grill of his first truck. The 2 images, the father he honored and the son he was raising, formed a new, unshakable legacy. A week later, he received a text from a number he hadn't seen in 2 years. It was Simone. "Can we get coffee, please? Just to talk." He hesitated, then agreed. They met at a neutral Starbucks on Lexington Avenue. She looked different. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a simple sweater and jeans. She looked tired, but the defensive hardness in her eyes had softened. She had started a new career path, going back to school to become a therapist. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her hands wrapped around a $4 latte. "It's okay, Simone," he replied. She took a deep breath. "I don't have any excuses, Monroe. I just want to say I'm sorry. For everything. For not believing in you. For not seeing your worth. For letting my family's obsession with money blind me to the good man I was married to. For not being your wife when you needed me to be." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "What you're doing with the apprenticeship, it's amazing. You're a good man, Monroe." He looked at her, the woman he had once loved so fiercely, and he felt not anger, but a quiet, bitter-sweet peace. The outrage was gone, burned away by time and purpose. "I forgive you, Simone," he said, and he meant it. "I forgave you a long time ago. For my own peace, not for yours. I hope you find what you're looking for." He left the coffee shop and walked back out into the bright afternoon. He looked at the city around him, at the people hustling to their jobs, building their lives. He realized that true wealth was never about the dollar amount in a bank account. It wasn't about a $1.9 million house or a $90,000 car. True wealth is the integrity you build your life on. It's the purpose you find in your work, the unshakable love you give your child, and the community you lift up alongside you. It's the quiet satisfaction of becoming a man your son is proud to draw a picture of, a man who is anything but temporary. What does true wealth mean to you? Is it found in a bank statement or in the legacy we build and the people we love? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories of justice, resilience, and the power of character.